I worked as a dispatcher for a pretty small ambulance station near a fairly large city in the middle of the United States, and I'm going to tell one of the craziest stories I have from this job. We had a patient who we will call Susan. She was a dialysis patient, and one of the services we offered was to take very unwell or disabled patients to and from these dialysis appointments. She lived with her son, who we will call David. He was in his late 40s, and his mother, Susan, in her late 70s or so. Every week we would have a unit bring Susan to and from her dialysis treatments 3 times a week. Everyone knew her at the station because we had been doing this for quite some time with Susan. We were all familiar with her and her son, whether it was the crew seeing her in person and taking care of her, or speaking to her or her son on the phone frequently about the appointments. As I had done, everyone knew her. Naturally, when crews had news about her health, they would report back to keep everyone in the loop with how she was. At one point, she was not feeling well at all, but she wanted to go to her dialysis appointment, so naturally we obliged and took her in. At this appointment, while receiving dialysis treatment, she lost consciousness and was promptly taken by our crew to the hospital. When it was time again for her dialysis appointment, we gave the hospital a call to see if she had been released and was able to go to the appointment. The hospital staff informed us that she would likely be released the following day and would be receiving that dialysis treatment in the hospital. Then the next treatment time rolled around, and we called the hospital, and we were told she had been released from their care the other day. This was great news, but a little strange due to the fact that we were always her first call to transport her to or from any hospital or appointment, and we hadn't transported her anywhere. We quickly moved on, however, and called David, her son, to see if she was going to be requiring us for her treatment that day. He informed us she wasn't feeling well and that she wasn't up to it, but that he was considering taking her back into the hospital. We tell him that if he needs us to just give us a call, and until further notice, we cancel her trip for the day. We never get a call. Next appointment rolls around, and we call David again to ask if she will be going. He says she's sick and she's back in the hospital. Weird again, since we hadn't taken her, but doesn't seem that off considering her health had been deteriorating. Next appointment, same thing happens. We call David. His mom's in the hospital. We move on. Now is where things took a bit of a turn. When the next appointment came up, we had tried calling David to ask about his mother's status, but he never answered or returned our calls. So, being that we had a contract with Susan and were to take her to these appointments unless told otherwise, we sent a crew to collect her for treatment. When the crew arrived at scene, they knocked on the door to no response. They knocked again and were greeted by David smoking a cigarette. David seeming surprised. The crew said they were there to pick up Susan for her appointment. David responded, stating he had forgotten to call, but Susan was still in the hospital not doing well. The crew gave their best wishes and David shut the door. But the crew felt like something was off. They immediately radioed to dispatch that something was wrong, and they requested we call the hospital David said she was at to see if she was still there. The hospital had no record of her being there since we last knew. So we had the crew leave the scene, and we called for a welfare check on Susan at her son's home. We heard nothing the rest of the day from police, David, Susan, or anyone else involved. The next morning I came into work, and the very first call I took began with, "This is Sheriff blank with blank. I'm calling to report back on the welfare check you asked us to perform yesterday." I was nervous as he sounded concerned, and I didn't really expect them to call us back with any news. He proceeded to let me know that upon arrival to the home, they spoke with David, who was adamant his mother didn't feel well, but that she was home from the hospital. The police asked to just check on Susan to make sure she was all right, and eventually David obliged, letting the police in. Once entering the home, they were met with a grim scene, though I imagine they smelled at first. They continued to explain that what the officers observed was the dead body of Susan, propped up on the couch wrapped in blankets, as if watching the television. But she had been dead for a while. They approximated around 2 weeks. When speaking to David, they found that he had been changing her clothes regularly and watching TV with her. Obviously, he was suffering from some sort of mental issue and grief, but the thing was, he had never taken good care of her until she was dead.